A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim. I seek refuge from the accursed, the Satan. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, most gracious, ever merciful. Our beloved Huzur, honored and distinguished guests and members, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon you all. It is indeed a history in the making, as it gives me the greatest pleasure to welcome you all to this evening reception held in the honor of His Holiness. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, successor to the promised Messiah, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih V, and head of the worldwide Ahmadiyya Muslim community. His Holiness will deliver the keynote address in due time, but as per our tradition, we will start our proceedings this evening with the recitation and translation of chapter 5, verse 9 of the Holy Quran. And for that, I request Mr. Mujibur Rahman Sanori, please.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. Translation. O ye who believe, be steadfast in the cause of Allah, bearing witness in equity, and let not a people's enmity incite you to act otherwise than with justice. Be always just, that is nearer to righteousness, and fear Allah. Surely Allah is aware of what you do. Thank you.
Our beloved Huzur, the distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad is the 5th Caliph, successor to the promised Messiah, and head of the worldwide Ahmadiyya Muslim community. He was elected to this spiritual office on 22nd April 2003, after the sad demise of Mirza Tahir Ahmad, the 4th Caliph. His Holiness was born on 15th September 1950 in Rabwah, Pakistan. He completed his Master of Science degree in Agricultural Economics in 1977 from the Agriculture University, Faisalabad, after which he formally dedicated his life to the service of Islam through the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. He served in Ghana from 1977 to 1985, where he engaged in social, educational, and agricultural development projects. He is credited with successfully growing wheat on Ghanaian soil for the first time in the nation's history. His deep love and commitment to the African plight is evident from many of his current social and charity projects there. Later, from 1985 until 1997, he served at various senior administrative posts within the community in Pakistan. He was appointed the head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Pakistan from 1997 until his election as Caliph in 2003. The election was held in London, and he remained there afterwards. He has widely spoken on the need of establishing peace in the world. He believes certain trends in the global quest for materialism and religious extremism may lead the humanity to another catastrophe similar to World War II. He initiated in 2004 an annual national peace symposium in the UK. He has recently spoken to the European parliamentarians in Brussels, the UK parliamentarians at Westminster, London, and members of the US Congress and Senate at the Capitol Hill, Washington, D.C. He has expressed his thoughts on the danger to world peace and our obligations as human beings to create an environment of tolerance. He has also advised through letters to the leaders of Iran and Israel to pacify their warring rhetoric. He has articulated his views and the efforts of the community to several political leaders, presidents, prime ministers, religious leaders, and other movers and shakers of the world. This visit of His Holiness to Australia is primarily to focus on the spiritual upbringing of the local Ahmadiyya Muslim community, who will get the honor only the fourth time in 110 years of Ahmadiyya presence in Australia to meet a caliph. Today's historical event involving the broader community is the second one after Melbourne, followed by the third one in Brisbane next week. I thank the great many guests and the range of guests present here today. Very shortly, the great many local, state, and federal politicians, the religious leaders, community workers, teachers, doctors, lawyers, principals, engineers, professors, journalists, and the many more influential guests will have an opportunity to listen to the keynote address by His Holiness. But not till we have short comments from some very respected dignitaries who are seated up here today. Can I call upon Senator, the Honourable Concetta Fierravanti-Wells, please. Now, she is representing the Prime Minister of Australia, the Honourable Tony Abbott, and Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Social Services, a Liberal Senator for New South Wales, please.
Thank you, Your Holiness, my many distinguished parliamentary colleagues, both state and federal councillors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Prime Minister and the Australian Government, I wish to congratulate the Ahmadi Muslim Association of Australia for hosting today's event. The Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, is unable to attend today and has asked me to pass on his best wishes. It is wonderful once again to welcome Your Holiness to Australia. Your distinguished service as an eminent and spiritual Muslim leader is highly regarded, and today it is truly a great honour for your community that you are inaugurating the Caliphate Centenary Hall. I would like to also acknowledge the critical contribution of the Muslim people to shaping our nation, from the Cameleers who helped explore and develop the Australian interior in the 19th century to the migrants who have made Australia home since 1945. They were pioneers in two ways. Firstly, they helped build the modern Australian economy. From the 1860s to the early 1900s, the Cameleers were instrumental in the success of early major infrastructure projects. Secondly, they formed the first group of Muslim followers in Australia. By 1861, they had built Australia's first mosque in Maree in South Australia. Anyone who has seen the remnants of the mosque cannot help but be moved by its basic and humble architecture, a reminder of the early Muslim believers of the 7th century in the land of Arabia. I note that Hassan Musa Khan, born in 1842, was the first Ahmadi in Australia. He is buried at the Karrakatta Cemetery in Western Australia. Since 1945, Australia has welcomed more than 7 million people. Our cultural diversity is a source of great social and economic strength, and the contributions of migrants and their families spanning generations has helped forge the unique Australian way of life that we enjoy today. Our successful multicultural society is founded on a commitment to the common 10 elements that unite us, combined with respect for and understanding of our social and religious differences. The religious freedom that we all enjoy in Australia is a testament to the strength of our democracy and values. I'm particularly pleased by a statement of Your Holiness made during your address in Koblenz in 2012, in which you said, "True loyalty requires a relationship built on sincerity and integrity. It is essential for a citizen of any country to establish a relationship of genuine loyalty and faithfulness to his nation." The Ahmadi community is committed to the common elements that unite the Australian society. As the daughter of migrants myself, I understand very well the hard work and sacrifices that many of you have made to build a better life for yourself and for your children. Your community is a valued and integral part of the wider Australian community. Community and religious leaders play a critical role in instilling the values of tolerance and harmony. Your Holiness, you exemplify in a practical way the strength of your beliefs. I would like to thank your community for their welcome, and I wish you well for this historic event.
Thank you very much, Senator, the Honourable Concetta Wells. Now, next we have got the Honourable Ed Husick. He is very local to us, federal member for Chifley and a very regular visitor to us. Honourable Ed Husick, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Friends, assalamu alaikum. It is, if I can say, important at the outset to recognise the traditional owners of the land, the Darug people, and to acknowledge and pay respects to elders past and present. And if I can also acknowledge the presence of many of my colleagues from the federal level, from the state level and from the local level. There's quite a few here, so I won't necessarily name them all. But Your Holiness, it is a great honour to spend time with you here today and to welcome you. I can let you know that the community has been exceptionally excited and looking forward to your arrival, as has been indicated only 4 times in 110 years that we've been able to welcome a spiritual leader of the Ahmadis to Australia. And it is of particular, if I can say, note that I didn't think it could be exceeded in terms of the excitement, but it has been building up quite significantly and understandably so. If I can say, Your Holiness, when you leave this country, you can be rightly proud of the community here. The Ahmadi community here, across disciplines, across professions, in so many ways, are exemplary citizens of this nation. And it is a highlight every year to be able to visit the mosque, and in particular note that every January, special mention is made of those young people who have excelled themselves in academia, in sporting, and not only that, in civic achievement, where they have demonstrated their willingness to make a contribution to the local community. It is something that we all as Australians can be proud of, but particularly, Your Holiness, it is something that I think you can be rightly proud of too. This country, Your Holiness, has welcomed people from all corners of the world. It has sought people to make their contribution and to recognise and reward that contribution. And to also not only, if I can say, build a sense of tolerance, but I think is always important to go beyond that to build and foster a sense of understanding and kinship. And your presence here tonight like all those that have come to Australia, is particularly welcomed because of the particular passion and energy and your deep-seated commitment to building tolerance and understanding across faiths and across the world. And so your presence here tonight is particularly special for that in that way. As I said, you promote peace, interreligious cohesion, and the fact that you have been able to address European parliaments, US Congress, other world leaders with a message of peace and understanding, reinforcing values across the globe that resonate so much here. Your visit will be remembered and treasured for years to come, and I certainly welcome and honour the opportunity to be able to spend time with you, but also to know that you are having such an impact on a community that has such a deep love for you and a deep regard for the things that you achieve across the planet. Thank you very much.
And Honourable Philip Roddick is the federal member for Berara and Liberal Party elder. His work as Immigration Minister and as Attorney General back in the days and the links with our community has been continuous. So I invite you to say a few words.
Your Holiness, welcome. Missionary Mahmoud, can I acknowledge my many colleagues in this form, Parliamentary Secretary, Minister, Leader, representatives of local government, friends. Can I also acknowledge the traditional owners, and can I pay my respects and acknowledge Uncle Greg, who is in the audience here today representing the Darug people. It's a great honour to welcome you back, Your Holiness, and I had the great privilege of meeting you in 2006. But my greatest privilege was to be Australia's Immigration Minister for some 7.5 years when we were able to welcome from Pakistan, under the Special Humanitarian Program, many thousands of Ahmadis who were the subject of very significant oppression, a matter of continuing concern, and something that we are still familiar with in other parts of the world. Your Holiness, I want to assure you that your flock are very welcome here in Australia. For us to be a nation that is drawn of peoples from all over the world, of different faiths, of different cultures, makes Australia a very special place, because while we're not perfect, I think we do it pretty well in making sure that people are welcome and able to make a contribution. And can I say, the presence of so many members of Parliament, so many people who are representative Australians in public life at an occasion like this, is a demonstration of the respect in which the Ahmadis are held here in Australia. It does give me a great deal of pleasure to be with you again and to be amongst your flock, and we would welcome you back for a 5th, 6th and 7th time if you are so disposed.
Thank you very much for your very kind words, the Honourable Philip Roddick. And as I said, it is always refreshing to hear from the so-called father of the house. 40 years. I think he is the 3rd longest serving parliamentarian in the history of Australian Parliament. So I think that calls for an applaud too. Next we got the Honourable Victor Dominello. He is a representative of the Premier of New South Wales and Minister for Citizenship and Communities and member for Ryde. Please.
Assalamu alaikum. Can I also begin by acknowledging country and in particular pay my respects to the elders both past and present, and also highlight Uncle Greg in the audience. To Your Holiness, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, one and all, I am here representing the Premier Barry O'Farrell, who sends his best wishes. Now, I will read the following message by the Honourable Barry O'Farrell, and it says, I'm delighted to welcome Your Holiness here to the New South Wales community. It is an honour for us to receive a visit from such a venerable spiritual leader. I'm aware of your commitment to achieving world peace and inter-religious harmony. I'm sure your visit will strengthen the harmony we already enjoy in New South Wales. Your many followers living in this state are assured of protection and support as they meet their religious obligations based on the Ahmadiyya beliefs. Best wishes for a happy and successful visit to New South Wales. Signed, the Premier of New South Wales, Barry O'Farrell. Thank you.
Honourable Victor, before you sit down, I've got something else to say, please. Thank you. Sure. First of all, thanks to Honourable Victor Dominello for his kind words as a minister and representing Mr. Barry O'Farrell, who could not make here today. Now, a disaster has struck, especially in the west part of Sydney. And for the current bushfire emergency, and for the support in need in yesterday's hostile conditions, I will request Minister Victor Dominello, on behalf of the Premier Fire Appeal, to accept a small cheque of $20,000 from His Holiness, please. Next, we got Mr. John Robertson. Now, he is the Leader of Opposition and Shadow Minister for Western Sydney and Leader of the Australian Labor Party in New South Wales. Mr. John Robertson, please.
Could I too begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're gathered on, the Darug people, pay my respects to the elders both past and present, and also acknowledge that theirs is one of the longest continuing cultures in the world. The many distinguished guests are here, in particular Your Holiness. I acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues. I also acknowledge Guy Zangari, who's the member for Fairfield, who is also here with us, and the many, many distinguished guests. Your Holiness, it is an absolute honour and a privilege to share time with you. Particularly your message I'm looking forward to that you will deliver here tonight. But having heard your words of wisdom over the time, we are privileged to have someone who walks the world stage with a very powerful message of faith and peace. In particular, at a time around the world where we see some people seek to use religion as an extreme means to place fear in the hearts of many, it is an absolute privilege to have you here, someone who preaches the need for peace, to have a leader, a religious leader, who is so well regarded by this community here, but right across the globe, who is prepared to stand up and talk about the necessities for peace, to talk about the fact that we do live in a global environment that is fragile, a global environment that requires us to be tolerant, but more importantly, requires leaders like yourself to speak out without fear or favour. Because it is leaders like yourself that bring that message of peace that will actually impact the sort of world we live in now and into the future. Your Holiness, we need more leaders like you. We need more leaders of communities like this community who are prepared to stand up and speak the word of faith and, more importantly, speak the words of peace. Because it is only through voices like yours that we will have stability once more across the globe. That when people are confident that their religious leaders, their political leaders are prepared to stand up and speak out. Speak out when others seek to terrorise the world, that you are that voice of peace, that you are that voice of hope and that voice of strength, that strength of faith and that voice of courage. So I feel very privileged and very honoured to share the stage with someone of your stature and with someone of your commitment to a much more peaceful world, and I am humbly thankful for this opportunity.
I think what Mr. John Robertson has pointed out is very relevant to the current world trends. And with those words, I will invite our fifth speaker, Mr. Kevin Connolly. He's the state member for Riverstone, a state MP who has been very local to us and who was at the airport to receive His Holiness and well before his arrival, quite early in the morning. If you can please highlight some moments for us.
Your Holiness, Mahmood Ahmed and other leaders of the local Ahmadi community, my parliamentary colleagues and leaders in other fields who are here today, distinguished guests, one and all. It has been my privilege for a number of years to attend events here at the mosque with the Ahmadi community on Australia Day, at national conferences and at the Caliphate anniversary celebrations some years ago. And at all of those times, I felt most welcome amongst a community of people who value the things that Australians value: the peace, the freedom, the stability, the fair go for other people that Australians value have been embraced clearly by the Ahmadi community. I commend the Ahmadi community here in Sydney for your commitment to be good citizens of Australia and good friends to people facing adversity. I had another example that I was going to mention, but we've seen one just a few moments ago in recognition of the tragic fires that occurred only yesterday. That reaction has been typical of the Ahmadi community in Sydney to events around them in their nation and beyond, and I do commend you for that. I was proud as a member of the New South Wales Government to be at Kingsford Smith Airport on the arrival of His Holiness in Sydney about 2 weeks ago. It was an occasion that is memorable for not only the Ahmadi community, but I believe for the New South Wales community to have a world leader of his stature arrive among us. Our conversation that morning occurred relatively soon after the Australian federal election, and so we spent a few moments talking about government in Australia and the system here. And for both of us, what was really notable and what underlined the value of our democratic system here was the smooth and peaceful transition of power from one government to another. Something that we might take for granted here in Australia, but which is rare in the world as power shifts from one group to another. And it is a great blessing. I know our stability, freedom and safety are blessings which I know the Ahmadis here value greatly. The Ahmadi teachings, which emphasise love for all and hatred for none, are most welcome here in Australia, and your contribution to our nation's future can be a great one. I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak, and I look forward to hearing shortly from His Holiness and to sharing the occasion with so many of my good friends here among your community.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kevin Connolly. Now, I would now invite our last speaker as a dignitary, the Honourable David Clark, Member for the New South Wales Legislative Council and Chairman of the New South Wales Parliamentary Standing Committee on Law and Justice. Thank you, please.
Well, dear friends and members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, it's a great honour and joy to be here tonight. It's a great honour and joy to welcome to this city and to this state and to this nation, together with other members of Parliament. It's a great honour to welcome the leader of tens of millions of the Ahmadiyyan faithful around the world from 200 countries. It's a great honour and privilege to welcome Your Holiness, Mirza Masroor Ahmad Khalifatul Masih V. And Your Holiness, can I say to you, can I assure you that here in Australia you are among friends. You are among friends in this nation. And we know the Ahmadiyyan, we know that the Ahmadiyyan Muslim community are a righteous people and a good people and a godly people, loyal Australians and hard-working Australians. And in their heart and in their soul, they have a love of good because they have a love of God. And the God that the Ahmadiyyan community worship is the God that I as a Christian worship, the one God, the only God, the God who always was, is now and forever shall be, That's the God that the Ahmadiyyan community worship, as do I. And Your Holiness, your illustrious reputation has preceded you here to Australia. Your stand around the world for interreligious harmony and tolerance and peace. And for these things, for this great task that you've undertaken, we praise you and we honour you and we exalt you here tonight, all these members of Parliament and all the other dignitaries as well. We also know, however, that in other parts of the world, the Ahmadiyyan Muslim faithful face difficult times. In some countries, they've seen their homes burned and their mosques desecrated. We've seen some members tortured. We've seen others murdered. As we saw only a few days ago, a number of the Ahmadiyyan Muslim faithful were murdered. And as Parliamentary Secretary for Justice in the Government of New South Wales, I believe in justice. And when there is not full justice for all, there is no justice for any. And so we all, members of both state and federal parliament, we appeal to those nations overseas where there are difficulties against the Ahmadiyyan Muslim community. We appeal that they step in to protect their citizens from the Ahmadiyyan community. And tonight, here we have representatives of the New South Wales government and of the Australian government and the opposition as well. And we're all here joined, and we say that here in Australia there will always be full freedom for the Ahmadiyyan Muslim community. There will always be justice in Australia for the Ahmadiyyans. And those who seek to discriminate against the Ahmadiyyan faithful will never be tolerated. Not ever will a hair on the head of a single member of the Ahmadiyyan community be tolerated. Never will any harm be tolerated. So not now and not ever. So tonight is a great and momentous event. I'm thankful to be here. And Your Holiness, I know that you would be thinking in your heart, God bless Australia, and we in our hearts would be saying, God bless the Ahmadiyyan Muslim faithful.
That was our last speaker, the Honourable David Clark, MLC. And with these words, we get to the keynote address now. I would be requesting His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih V, the worldwide spiritual and administrative head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, to deliver the keynote address.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. All distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace and blessing of Allah be upon you all. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to all of the guests who have accepted our invitation and joined us here today. For you to accept the invitation of a religious organization and to enter the mosque complex, despite not being associated to our religion, is a clear reflection of your open-heartedness and your very tolerant attitude. Your attendance is even more noteworthy given that in today's world so much is written and spoken against Islam, and a truly terrifying portrayal of certain so-called Muslims is being presented. It is a cause of regret that, to some extent, this fear amongst non-Muslims is justified because some so-called Muslims have conducted the most horrific terrorist acts and killings both in their countries and abroad. No doubt they have created a state of fear which is terrifying the non-Muslim world, whilst at the same time defaming the pure name of Islam. In short, your attendance is proof of your enlightened minds and is a testimony to the fact that you wish to learn the real and true teachings of Islam. I'm sure that many of you will have heard about the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat from your friends or acquaintances, and so will have some idea about what type of community we are. And you have heard just recently from so many speakers as well. I'm sure you will have heard that the Ahmadiyya Jamaat is a peace-loving community that acts entirely in accordance with the true teachings of Islam. It is a community that not only promotes peace, but whose every act and activity is conducted in an entirely peaceful manner. It is for these reasons that even those who are not well acquainted with our community will have felt at ease joining us today. Nonetheless, there may remain some fears or misgivings in the hearts of a few of our guests. The truth is that it is almost impossible to entirely eradicate all doubts or fears from another person's heart until a close relationship has been formed. I should at this point present a basic Islamic commandment which a Muslim must observe if he or she is to demonstrate high moral standards. Islam teaches that a Muslim must show gratitude and appreciation wherever it is due. In this regard, the founder of Islam, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, taught that a Muslim who does not profess thanks for an act of goodness or kindness is not grateful to God Almighty. With this in mind, a person who claims that Allah is the focal point and center of his life could never tolerate remaining ungrateful to him. Thus, gratitude is not merely a moral obligation or courtesy. It is actually a religious duty for a Muslim, because the basic objective for any Muslim is to please, any true Muslim I should rather say, is to please God Almighty. It may well be the case that most secular people routinely express thanks to others, but they do so as a moral duty because they are good people who live in a good society. It is not a religious duty for them. However, for a true Muslim, offering thanks is a necessary element of Islam's extremely intricate teachings that he must follow. Anyway, what I have said has formed quite a long introduction. However, it was actually not just an introduction, but an explanation of one part of Islamic teachings. I shall now expand upon these teachings by explaining why the Ahmadiyya community places so much emphasis on drawing mankind's attention towards the highest moral standards and establishing peace. The fundamental reason is that the founder of Islam, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, prophesied that a time would come when the practice of Muslims would move far away from the original teachings of the religion. He said that this decline would continue for around 1,000 years, at which time God Almighty would send a person as the Imam Mahdi, guided one, and as the Prophet Messiah. He would come to guide the Muslims towards the real and true teachings of Islam. At a time when the world would in the most part have forgotten its creator. The Prophet Messiah would also provide the people of other religions with guidance so that they too could develop a loving bond with God Almighty. In fulfillment of the grand prophecy, we Ahmadi Muslims believe that the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, Hazrat Mirza Ahmad of Qadian, peace be upon him, was the very person who was sent by God as the Imam Mahdi and as the Prophet Messiah. Not only did the Prophet Messiah announce that he had been sent by God, but he also established a community of his followers. The Prophet Messiah himself explained the key objective of his advent. He said, "The task which God Almighty has appointed me is that I should remove the malice that has formed between God and his creation and restore the relationship of love and sincerity between them." He further said, "The second purpose is that for the sake of God's people and out of compassion, all persons should engage their strengths and capabilities in the service and well-wishing of God's people. And they must treat gratefully and beneficially all people, from kings and emperors down to an ordinary person who has done them any favor. Indeed, people should not only restrict themselves to responding with gratitude and by benefiting others. In fact, the Prophet Messiah has further added, one should love mankind to such a degree that he should consider the trials and tribulations of others as his own and should pray for them. It is on the basis of these compassionate teachings that the Ahmadiyya Muslim community makes every effort to spread love, kindness, brotherhood, and peace to every corner of the world. Ahmadi Muslims can literally be described in just 2 lines as those people who fulfill the rights owed to God and those who fulfill the rights owed to God's creation. Without acting upon these teachings, a person cannot claim to be a true Ahmadi Muslim. If we reflect and consider, we will realize that these are the very virtues that today's world stands in urgent need of. These are the principles which can become the means of establishing world peace. I say this because the relationship of love and sincerity can only be formed with God when a person fulfills the rights owed to him, and God's rights can only be fulfilled when his commands are followed. One major command of Allah the Almighty is given in the chapter 5, verse 9 of the Holy Quran, Allah the Almighty says, O ye who believe, be steadfast in the cause of Allah, bearing witness in equity, and let not the people's enmity incite you to act otherwise than with justice. Be always just, that is nearer to righteousness, and fear Allah. Surely Allah is aware of what you do. This is the standard of justice that the person has the right to expect from others. Neither personal grievances nor national enmities should lead to injustice or unequal treatment. No matter the circumstances, fairness and impartiality must always prevail. In the verse I have just quoted, Allah says, adopt righteousness. This means that if a person fulfills the rights of others by acting with true justice, that deed will itself be classed as an act of worship, because the underlying intention was to gain the pleasure of Allah. Therefore, the very highest standards for Muslims were established by Allah more than 1,400 years ago, so that an atmosphere of peace, love, and affection could be fostered. If any Muslim does not adhere to these teachings, it would be entirely wrong to blame the teachings. Rather, the fault would lie with the individuals. I am sure that underlying reasons that motivate the Ahmadiyya Muslim community to promote peace and brotherhood to such a great extent will have been made clear by what I have just explained. Similarly, there are countless other commandments given by the Holy Quran which underscore the importance of fulfilling the rights of mankind. For example, the name of the hall in which this reception is being held proclaims that whosoever enters it will attain nothing but peace and security. It also attests to the fact that those who have built it are they who spread peace and harmony in the world. This hall has been named the Khilafat Centenary Hall. The word Khilafat means successor. The task of any successor is to continue the mission and objective of the person whom he is following. And so the task of the Ahmadiyya Khilafat is to continue pursuing the peaceful objectives laid down by the founder of the Ahmadiyya community, which I have just outlined. And so, under the guidance of the institution of Khilafat, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community has continued this work for more than 100 years. This hall was constructed to commemorate the successful completion of 100 years of the Ahmadiyya Khilafat. It was built with the aim that Ahmadis remain constantly reminded of the objectives and responsibilities entrusted to them, which they continue to fulfill under the guidance and leadership of Khilafat of the time. Upon learning how devoted and attached Ahmadi Muslims are to the Khilafat, it is possible that a question may arise in the minds of some people. It may be that some people wonder whether due to such devotion, the Khalifa could, God forbid, lead Ahmadis towards extremism or the use of force. To answer this, it should be clarified that the first part of the prophecy made by the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was that after a long period of spiritual darkness lasting around 1,000 years, the promised Messiah and Imam Mahdi would appear with teachings of peace, compassion, and love. It is evident from the extracts of his teachings I have presented that the promised Messiah came with exactly these objectives. And so, as we believe that the first part of the prophecy has been fulfilled, then we must also, according to our beliefs, accept the truth of the second part of the prophecy, which was that following the promised Messiah, his khilafat would be permanent and would remain until the end of the time. And his khilafat would continuously draw mankind's attention to fulfilling the rights owed to God and his creation. Rather than cause any threat or danger, the khilafat of the promised Messiah would only be a source of peace. About the true system of khilafat, the Holy Quran has clearly said that it will be a means of transforming a state of fear and panic into a state of peace and security, so long as the people continue to remember God's commands and follow the guidance of the Khalifa. Where on the one hand, the Khilafat in Ahmadiyya is a source of peace and tranquility for all Ahmadi Muslims, it can also be a source of peace and security for non-Ahmadis if they pay heed to what the Khalifa says. The history of the Ahmadiyya community testifies to the fact that the promised Messiah himself and all of his successors emphasized the need to avoid wars and towards fulfilling the rights due to one another. The promised Messiah himself proclaimed that he had come to bring an end to all forms of religious warfare. Furthermore, I have already mentioned how strongly he emphasized the fulfillment of rights of one another. A society where religious wars have come to an end and where mankind's attention is drawn towards serving humanity and fulfilling each other's rights can only become a heaven of peace. Certainly, this is exactly the type of society that the world stands in great need of today. All of the Khalifas who have led the Ahmadiyya Muslim community have always advocated for peace, unity, and sense of mutual brotherhood. Let me give just a couple of examples. After the First World War, the second Khalifa of our community informed the world that without true justice, peace would not develop and the League of Nations would fail. Then, in 1990, when the situation in Iraq deteriorated, our fourth Khalifa warned that not only would the Arab countries suffer, but ultimately the peace of the entire world would be destroyed. Indeed, the world has since observed that both of these warnings proved entirely accurate, and today conflict continues to plague the world. For the past 4 or 5 years, I have been warning that the world stands in desperate need of peace. No one should assume that a war between any two countries will remain limited to just them or to a particular region. Rather, ultimately, it will culminate with a world war. Indeed, the state of the world today is clearly indicating that we are on the brink of an extremely dangerous global war. Such a war will include countries that possess nuclear weapons and whose leaders are trigger-happy and do not care about the horrific consequences of their acts. As a result of their carefree attitudes, the world may come to witness a truly devastating destruction. Thus, I implore all relevant parties to come to their senses and act with wisdom. They should rise above their selfish ways and their personal interests. They must realize that such a war will harm not only today's world, but will have a horrific impact on our future generations. Those amongst you have an influence on the major powers of the world, or who can convey this message to those who have access to the corridors of powers, should urgently fulfill their responsibilities. Do not consider the problems and conflicts of today's world to be minor or insignificant, but instead strive your utmost and make every possible effort to establish peace. Perhaps some amongst you will not agree with me, with my analysis. However, it is when a person believes that his own strengths, his intellect, and those around him are all powerful that he walks on a path paved with danger. It is at that point where a person becomes blind to the existence of God and to his power, that Almighty God's decree sets into motion. Remember, man cannot escape the results of his actions, and so will have to suffer the consequences of the cruelties and disorders he has perpetrated. Thus, I ask all of you once again to raise your voice with justice against all forms of cruelty, corruption, and disorder, so that the world can be saved from destruction. According to Islam, the requirements of justice are fulfilled when a person acknowledges his mistakes and does not only value the interests of his friends or of his own policies, but instead gives preference to fulfilling the rights of all people. May Allah enable the world to understand this reality and be saved from any type of major destruction or calamity. Ameen. At the end, I would also like to extend my sympathies through you to people affected by the outbreak of bushfire in particular, and the people and government of this state and country in general. I pray, may Allah the Almighty save the people from any further loss and remove their hardships. Once again, I would like to thank all of you for taking the time and effort to join with us today. May Allah bless you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We Muslims raise our hand for prayer, but everyone else has got the right to pray in whichever form, whichever way you want to. I'll be requesting His Holiness to lead us into prayer, please.
Now silent prayer, please. Ameen.
It's absolutely magnificent to be able to hear the true message of Islam as distinct from sometimes the aberrations that are put out there, and the peaceful messages that are coming across, and the genuine love of the people that are here for each other and for this country, Australia, and for life itself is just a real, how can I put it? It's very difficult. It's a real topping up and the feeling of goodwill makes you always leave these meetings with a feeling that all is really good in the world and that there are people working hard to ensure that we will ultimately bring about peace for everyone, and we will be brothers and sisters working together for the good of mankind. It may sound airy-fairy, it may sound strong and a bit of this, but the reality is that if anyone doubts it, I invite them to come to a meeting and listen to the genuine speech and feel the fellowship and the genuine love for each other that's here, and they will go away changed.
His Holiness's words were very important, particularly as we reflect on world events today. That his message of peace is a very important one, and it's very good to see His Holiness again here in Australia, and on behalf of the Australian government. It was very good to be here this evening and to hear him speak and to be here with the Ahmadi community as they celebrate this very historic event.
His Holiness' speech was inspirational. You know, we do live in a world where we live in an uneasy peace, and as His Holiness said, if we're not careful, that peace could easily be disrupted. And we do need leaders of his calibre to continually preach the message of peace. We live in a great multicultural society here in New South Wales, where we have all faiths, all cultures, and we all come together in this great big melting pot. But the only way that it will continue to work, whether it's here or elsewhere, is if we have ongoing dialogue, where that dialogue is built on understanding, where the central platform is peace. So this is an important part of that.
It's a fantastic opportunity to hear from His Holiness. I said in my speech how privileged I felt, and I think how privileged we all were to be in the room, to listen to a leader who walks the world stage talking about the importance of tolerance, of faith and peace. We need more leaders like that now on the world stage talking about these issues, because far too often we see conflict emerge, we see extremism, and we see that conflict turn to war. What we need are leaders who are prepared to make their voices for peace, and His Holiness is somebody who does that so well. Events like these are absolutely critical to break down ignorance, because it's ignorance that breeds intolerance, and intolerance leads to conflict. We need to break those barriers down, and the more we talk with each other, share a meal, the easier it is to break down the barriers of ignorance. I'm always ecstatic to come to an event like this, share a meal, share a conversation, and get to know each other as fellow human beings. When we break those barriers down and we understand that we are all fellow humans, that ignorance disappears very quickly.
His Holiness, in this time of great political and in some areas religious upheaval, His Holiness is coming along with a message of tolerance and interfaith harmony, which I think is the most important message of this age that we need to hear. I think it's probably one of the most important things facing mankind at this time, and he's come forward and he's going out there, not just talking, he's actually going around to try and achieve something. You know, going to speak to in the various parliaments of the world, I think is very important, and the more that the words of His Holiness can be heard, then the better it's going to be for humanity and for peace. I was very impressed with His Holiness, with the message that he brings of tolerance and human rights, and I think he's a man who speaks very sensibly and very responsibly, and we're certainly very privileged to have him here in Australia.
The message was loud and clear. It was all about peace and harmony and security. And his comments were just not just about Australia, but global. And peace is a message. Peace is Islam, and he's carrying the message of Islam to Australia in a way that no others have done. And it was It was just a beautiful message to convey to the wider Australian society, the members of Parliament that we have here, the other members of the community, to listen to the message of peace from a Muslim leader. Unfortunately, we hear and see right around the globe messages of war and terror and so forth. That is not reflective or representative of Islam. This is representative and reflective of Islam. So I was delighted to be here.
It's nice to hear a speaker of his calibre and a leader of his significance make a sermon on something that is so significant.
What was your take-home message from tonight's event?
Apart from the sermon, again, which I will take home because it's great advice for all of us, actually, to be thankful and to say so. But to see the extraordinary achievements of this community in building a place for itself to learn and keep the faith alive is quite remarkable. I mean, when religions come to a new country, keeping the base strong so that people can grow in the faith in a new country where it is so much smaller than it is in the countries of origin is incredibly important. It's important that we have leaders of great significance in our community, and it's extremely important that such leaders visit as well, because faith is cumulative. It's developed over centuries. The knowledge is learnt over centuries, and when you move it to a new place, you need to bring that knowledge with you.
His comments about the true meaning of Islam and the true faith were particularly poignant for me. I also think that it is important for the world to recognise, and indeed I think this whole community recognises, that when you have a strong and forthright international religious leader, you really do a great justice to the people who follow you. And I think that is replicated, indeed reflected, by the community that's here in Western Sydney and beyond Western Sydney. I think it also demonstrates the way in which the Ahmadiyya community has sought to become part of the broader Australian community. I've seen the people who are in the audience here tonight at many functions here, and it is indeed an event that was on everyone's social calendar this evening. I think it also demonstrates the power of religion to bring people together rather than divide them. And there are people from many different faiths here, many different political backgrounds and many different professions. And the fact that His Holiness can command such respect from such a diverse group of people is a real credit to him and to the faith.